The laugh cut sharper than crystal. A woman in a blood-red gown jabbed her finger across the gala floor, her pearls rattling as she barked. "Hey, Blackie, go serve the champagne. You don't belong here." Her voice traveled like a whip under chandeliers that glowed cold and merciless. 3 men beside her, suits pressed, smiles polished, laughed in sync, as if cruelty was a chorus they'd rehearsed. Faces turned. Conversations stalled. Glass stems froze halfway in the air. In a ballroom built for applause, silence fell heavier than music. And at the center, she stood, the black woman in white, not glittering, not dripping in diamonds, just still, composed. Her hand held a phone near her ear, her eyes fixed straight ahead, eyes that had seen this theater before. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. She didn't flinch, didn't answer. Her calm was louder than their insults. That silence unsettled them more than any retort could. The woman in red leaned closer to her companions, laughing harder, her voice designed to be overheard. Security must have slipped. How did she even get in? The men echoed, one adding, "Wrong room, sweetheart. This is a billion-dollar table, not open seating." A ripple spread. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, eager not to be complicit. Others leaned in, scenting scandal like perfume. The cruelty wasn't hidden, it was public, performed, draped in satin and arrogance. And still, she remained quiet. Her white gown, simple and unmarked, made her an outlier in a sea of sequins. To them, it screamed outsider. To her, it was armor. In the corner, a young reporter froze with his drink halfway raised. His pulse quickened. Instinct overrode hesitation. He tapped his phone, recording discreetly. His whisper to himself barely registered under the noise. This doesn't feel right. They don't know who she island. The camera captured it all, the pointing finger, the mocking eyes, the smirk that thought it was untouchable. Somewhere inside her, a memory stirred. She had heard this tone before at 17, outside a scholarship dinner she nearly wasn't allowed to attend. At 25, when a hotel concierge told her to wait for real guests, though her name was printed on the suite. Now again, decades later, wrapped in champagne laughter. But she didn't summon those memories with pain. She carried them like steel. The ballroom didn't know it yet, but justice had already entered the room. And it wasn't wearing pearls. She hadn't chosen the gown to impress. She chose it to disarm. In a ballroom where sequins flashed like daggers and tuxedos shimmered under chandeliers, she wore white, plain, minimal, a cut that spoke of precision, not vanity. To strangers, it looked understated. To her, it was intentional armor. Because tonight wasn't about blending in, it was about testing the room. Her name, though no one here spoke, it was Naomi Cole, 42 years old, CEO of Orion Global, a company valued north of $60 billion, the very firm underwriting tonight's gala. The irony? Every glass of champagne lifted in mockery was poured on her dime. But Naomi Cole had learned long ago, wealth doesn't erase prejudice. It only sharpens the ways people try to deny it. She remembered 20 years back her first corporate gala. Fresh MBA, second-hand gown, the only black woman in a hall of 300. A waiter handed her a tray, mistaking her for staff. She carried it for 2 minutes before someone realized she was a guest. That humiliation hardened into resolve. Since then, she'd attended hundreds of events. And every time, she walked in prepared not for applause, but for dismissal. Tonight was no exception. The red dress woman's laughter still rang across the marble. Her companions, heirs to a family fortune built on oil, leaned into their cruelty like it was currency. One whispered loud enough to carry, "Imagine thinking she belongs at a billion-dollar table." Naomi's lips barely moved. Her breathing didn't quicken. She had trained herself to hold still under fire. Not because she lacked words, but because silence unsettled bullies faster than anger. Her phone, still pressed lightly against her ear, wasn't a prop. On the other end, her assistant was waiting. A protocol ready, a system armed. Naomi knew every insult would soon weigh heavier than a pearl necklace. Around the hall, eyes kept stealing toward her. Some gleamed curiosity, others pity, a few resentment. She felt them all, and she welcomed it, because exposure was the point. What the laughing family didn't know, what most of this room didn't know, was that tonight Contracts worth 1 billion were on the line. Their signatures needed her approval. Their futures depended on her pen. But she didn't stride into the ballroom with a crown or entourage. She walked in as herself, alone, silent, watching, letting them reveal themselves. Because power, she had learned, isn't proven by entry, it's proven by endurance. So she stood there, pearl-white gown against red silk insults, calm voice against shrill laughter, waiting for them to write their own downfall, word by word, smirk by smirk, and they were writing fast. The music tried to return, but the tension strangled it. Violins swelled and then faltered, the melody thinning as conversations turned into whispers. The gala, meant to dazzle, now felt like a stage where one woman in white stood against a chorus of ridicule. The woman in red pressed her advantage, leaning on her chair like royalty claiming territory. "Security really failed tonight," she said louder, sweeping her hand toward Naomi. "Who let the help wander in?" Laughter rippled again, small, poisonous waves. A man beside her added, "This section is reserved. Someone escort her to general admission before the donors see." Naomi didn't move. Her stillness only amplified the noise. From the far side of the ballroom, a young reporter, barely 26, press badge tucked discreetly inside his jacket, lowered his champagne flute. He whispered into his phone's mic, recording every word. "They don't realize who she is. This could blow open." Near the stage, the event coordinator noticed the commotion. He was thin, harried, balancing prestige on his shoulders. He rushed over, voice pitched low but firm. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. This area is for confirmed VIPs only." The irony struck sharper than crystal. Her company had signed the sponsorship contract that made this gala possible. The logo Orion Global was printed on every program, every banner, every invitation. Yet here he was, ushering her away from her own investment. Naomi lifted her gaze, steady and unreadable. "And if I don't?" The coordinator cleared his throat, glancing nervously at the laughing family. "Then I'll have to call security. This event protects its image." The words hung heavy. Protects its image. She remembered hearing that exact phrase before, years ago when a bank froze her account for unusual activity despite her spotless record. Or when a hotel clerk denied her suite, insisting on protecting policy. Always the same shield policy, image, protocol words that disguised prejudice. Across the ballroom, murmurs spread. Guests who hadn't noticed at first were now watching. Some frowned. Others pulled out their phones discreetly. The red dress woman smirked, sensing victory. She lifted her glass, voice syrupy with disdain. "Let her go, it's embarrassing. She clearly doesn't belong." Her words traveled under chandeliers, slicing through the space. Naomi didn't reply. She didn't flinch. She simply stood, phone still in hand, eyes locked forward as if rooted deeper than marble. That silence drew attention. More eyes turned. The story was shifting, not in whispers, but in witness. One young man near the back, dressed in a modest suit, muttered just loud enough for his neighbor, "She hasn't said a word," and they looked terrified by it. The neighbor nodded. "It's always the quiet ones you should fear." The stage was set. Every insult had become a spotlight, and Naomi Cole, calm as stone, was letting the room see exactly who held the power here. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't even shift her stance. The ballroom expected drama, protests, tears, maybe a shouted defense. Instead, she gave them stillness. A stillness so absolute it unsettled the very people mocking her. The red dress woman tilted her head, waiting for a reaction. When none came, she scoffed and turned to her companions. "See? Nothing to say. She knows she's out of place." But Naomi's silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. At 17, she'd been denied entry to a scholarship banquet, told bluntly the room was full. She stood outside in the rain for an hour, holding her acceptance letter, until a professor finally spotted her and ushered her in. She remembered the whispers then, "She doesn't belong here." Those words carved into her bones, not as wounds, but as fuel. At 28, during her first acquisition pitch, an investor leaned back in his chair and muttered to the room, "She looks more like an assistant than a founder." Naomi had smiled, delivered her numbers, and by the end of that meeting signed the deal that bought out his firm. She carried those memories now not as scars, but as sharpened blades she didn't need to unsheath. The lessons were simple. Stay calm, stay rooted, let arrogance speak itself into a corner. So she stood, the phone at her side, her posture unyielding. She inhaled once, exhaled once, eyes steady. Every detail, the curve of her shoulders, the quiet strength in her jawline spoke louder than protest. Around her, the energy shifted. Some guests leaned in closer, sensing something beyond appearances. A young woman near the buffet whispered to her friend. "She's not flustered, not even a little." Her friend frowned. "It's like she's waiting for them to bury themselves." The coordinator, still flustered, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, please, if you'll just move aside." Naomi didn't move. Her voice, calm but carrying, finally broke the silence. "I'm not here to disrupt your image. I'm here to finish what I came for." The simplicity of the statement, delivered without force, landed harder than a shout. The red dress woman narrowed her eyes, unsure whether to laugh or bristle. To those watching, Naomi's restraint was becoming its own kind of spectacle. She hadn't raised her tone, hadn't defended her right to stand there, and yet the arrogance of her accusers was beginning to look desperate. A veteran businessman at the edge of the crowd muttered to no one in particular. "She's playing the long game. You can see it." He was right. Naomi Cole wasn't surviving the moment. She was shaping it. The marble floors, the chandeliers, the glittering gowns, they were supposed to dwarf her. Instead, her stillness magnified her presence. She was no longer the outsider in the room. She was becoming the center. And the louder they tried to erase her, the clearer her power became. It began with a single red light. A phone camera blinking quietly from the far corner of the ballroom. The young reporter had angled his lens just above the rim of his champagne flute, catching every frame, the mocking finger, the smirks, the coordinator's nervous pleas. His pulse raced as he whispered into the mic, "They don't know who she island. This is bigger than they realize." He wasn't alone. At a table near the back, a pair of graduate students invited on scholarship tickets exchanged looks. One of them, a young black woman in a navy dress, clenched her jaw. She reached for her phone but hesitated, glancing at Naomi's calm face. "She's not recording," she muttered. Her friend replied softly, "Yeah, but maybe we should." The room was shifting. Small murmurs carried between tables like sparks, searching for kindling. Why are they going after her? She hasn't even said anything. Feels ugly. Not everyone sympathized. A middle-aged donor in a gold tie sneered under his breath. "Always playing the victim. Look at her waiting for attention." But his wife tugged his sleeve, whispering, "She hasn't moved. Doesn't look like someone seeking pity." At the front, the red dress woman noticed the growing eyes. She leaned back with a laugh, raising her voice for the crowd. "Careful, people. Some of us worked our whole lives to be here. Others just sneak in and pretend." Gasps followed. Phones lifted higher. What had begun as an inside insult was now a public display. The words echoed too loudly to dismiss. Naomi still didn't react. Her silence was a mirror, forcing everyone else to hear the ugliness without distraction. And that mirror was starting to make some uncomfortable. The coordinator fidgeted, wiping sweat from his brow. He glanced nervously at the cameras, then at Naomi. "Please, ma'am, before this escalates." But escalation was already happening. Not through her, but through them. At the far side, an elderly guest leaned on his cane, voice gravelly yet firm. "She hasn't raised her voice once. But you're making this gala look rotten." The crowd stirred. A ripple of agreement. The young reporter zoomed in, whispering for his recording. "Watch this. They're exposing themselves, and she's just standing." A woman in silver sequins whispered to her date, "That's not just a guest. Look at her posture. Look at her eyes." He frowned, nodding slowly. "Feels like she owns the room already." The laughter that once felt dominant now rang hollow, brittle. Phones kept recording, eyebrows raised. The mockery was no longer private entertainment, it was evidence. And Naomi Cole, in her silence, had turned the ballroom into a witness stand. The ballroom doors parted with a hush of velvet. Victor Hale, chairman of the gala committee, strode in like he owned the chandeliers above his head. Tall, silver-haired tuxedo pressed sharp as glass. He'd built his reputation on discipline and order, and tonight he was about to enforce both. The red dress woman lifted her hand, beckoning him like an ally. "Victor, thank God, we've got a problem guest." Victor's eyes scanned the scene, landing on Naomi. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered, then contempt hardened his jaw. "Ma'am," he said, voice carrying through the hush, "this section is reserved. Whatever mix-up led you here, it ends now." The murmurs swelled. Phones angled higher. Naomi didn't blink. The coordinator at his side whispered quickly, but Victor waved him off. He stepped closer, towering, his presence meant to dwarf her. "You've disrupted enough. Please collect your things and leave. We have image to uphold." That phrase, again, image. It rolled off his tongue like law, but it was nothing more than prejudice dressed in etiquette. The red dress woman smirked, sipping her champagne like victory was already sealed. "Told you," she said loudly. "She doesn't belong." Victor's voice sharpened. "This gala honors billion-dollar partnerships. Guests of your profile are not on the list. I'll have security escort you." The room shifted. Gasps, whispers, tension climbing like a violin string wound too tight. Near the buffet, the young reporter muttered into his phone, "He has no idea who she is. This is a disaster." A woman in silver sequins shook her head, whispering to her partner, "She's on the banner. Look, Orion Global, that's her company." Her partner frowned, uncertain. "Then why aren't they recognizing her?" "Because they don't want to." Naomi inhaled once, steady. Exhaled once, steady. No flinch, no rush. She stood like marble carved into patience. Victor misread it as weakness. He leaned closer, voice low but audible enough for nearby cameras. "You're embarrassing yourself. Step out before we remove you." The crowd's tension thickened. Some guests looked horrified, others complicit. Every insult, every dismissal was now captured in pixels and memory. Naomi didn't budge. The quiet in her stance was louder than his threats. And as Victor straightened, expecting obedience, a new ripple coursed through the room. The silence wasn't submission, it was suspense. The gala thought they were protecting their image. But with every word, every shove toward exclusion, they weren't protecting anything. They were exposing themselves. The crystal shattered before the words did. The woman in red slammed her glass against the marble table, the stem snapping, champagne spraying like fragments of spite. The sharp crack cut through the music, through the whispers, through every pretense of civility. "Enough!" she barked, pointing straight at Naomi. "This fraud is stealing our moment. Get her out." Gasps erupted across the room. Guests pulled back, gowns swishing, suits stiffening. The young reporter's camera zoomed in, trembling in his hand. Victor Hale didn't flinch. He seized the momentum. "Security!" His voice boomed under the chandeliers. "Remove this woman at once. She has no business here." The ballroom doors swung wide, and two uniformed guards stepped in, their posture rigid, hands hovering near Naomi's arms before they even reached her. Naomi's stillness didn't break. She stood anchored, her phone at her side, her eyes steady on the chaos unfolding. The red dress woman sneered, her voice sharp enough to cut silk. "See? She won't even defend herself, because she can't. She's a thief, a pretender." Her companions chimed in mocking laughter, muttered slurs, the weight of entitlement layered thick. She probably forged an invite. Dressed like staff and thinks she's a queen. The guards moved closer. One reached out. His hand brushed Naomi's sleeve. Gasps echoed. A woman in silver sequins clapped a hand over her mouth. The young reporter whispered into his phone, urgent now. "They're touching her. This is bad. This is really bad." Across the ballroom, a scholar in a modest suit stood abruptly. His chair screeched against marble. "She hasn't done anything," he shouted. His voice cracked, but it carried. "You're humiliating her for existing." The room trembled with noise. Guests filming, others muttering, some shaking their heads in disgust. Naomi finally spoke. Her voice, low but clear, sliced through the frenzy. "Be careful." The guard froze, his grip slackening. Something in her tone measured, absolute, made him hesitate. The red dress woman scoffed, her voice rising in desperation. "Arrest her, do it. She doesn't belong in this room, and everyone knows it." The words reverberated, ugly and undeniable, into every recording phone, every witness's ear, and still, Naomi didn't move. She let their fury crescendo, let their cruelty paint the scene, because she knew, in a matter of moments, the curtain would rip wide open. The ballroom thought they were watching her downfall. They didn't realize they were watching theirs. Naomi lifted her phone, not in panic, not in haste, but with the poise of someone who had rehearsed this moment in silence. The guard's hand still hovered near her sleeve, frozen by the weight of her warning. She pressed one button. Her voice was calm, steady, measured. "Lena," she said softly, "initiate the protocol. Verify tonight's contracts." On the other end, her assistant's voice cut through instantly, crisp and professional. "Confirmed, ma'am. System live. Compliance board linked in. Do you want me to flag the Hale family first?" The words weren't loud, but in a ballroom tuned to spectacle, every syllable carried. Heads turned. Phones caught it. The red dress woman blinked, momentarily confused. Victor Hale sneered. What is this? Some performance? Naomi's chasm at his, unblinking. Number, this is record-keeping. The murmurs swelled. Guests who'd been whispering now leaned forward. Someone near the buffet whispered into their phone. She's calling in corporate systems. This isn't a bluff. The red dress woman tried to laugh, brittle and hollow. Oh, please. You think we're afraid of your little theatrics? You don't even belong here. Naomi didn't flinch. Strange, she replied, voice low but carrying, since every glass you're holding tonight was paid for by my company. A ripple spread across the room. Guests exchanged shocked looks. The young reporter's hands shook as he adjusted focus. She said, my company, who is she? On the phone, Lena's voice returned, efficient as ever. Ma'am, the contracts are live. The Hale family's billion-dollar deal is pending your authorization. Do you want me to proceed? The red dress woman froze mid-sip. Her companions faltered. Even Victor's composure slipped, eyes narrowing in sudden calculation. Naomi let the silence linger, heavy and deliberate. Then she spoke, her voice sharp as glass. Document everything said in this room. Every word, every insult, every attempt to remove me, and link it to the contracts. Lena didn't hesitate. Logged, time-stamped, and archived. The crowd stirred. What had started as spectacle was morphing into evidence. The power dynamic shifted like a current under marble floors. Victor tried to recover, forcing authority back into his tone. This is nonsense. You're bluffing. Naomi tilted her head, calm and surgical. Then call it. Stand by your words. But understand this, your signatures depend on mine, and I don't sign with thieves. Gasps erupted. Someone near the stage whispered, she's holding their deal. Another muttered, no wonder she's so calm. The red dress woman's knuckles whitened around her broken glass stem. Her arrogance cracked, visible to every camera recording, and Naomi Cole, silent until now, had begun her counterstrike. The gala was no longer laughing. The ballroom, moments ago dripping with laughter, now felt like a courtroom, every eye a jury, every phone a recorder. Naomi let the hush stretch, her silence filling the gilded air like a verdict waiting to fall. Then she spoke. You keep saying I don't belong. Her tone was steady, her cadence slow, each word deliberate. But let's be precise. This gala, this wine, these banners, even this chandelier above us are all paid for by Orion Global, my company. Gasps cracked through the crowd like thunder. Programs were lifted, eyes darting to the embossed logo at the bottom, sponsored by Orion Global. The silver-sequined guest mouthed the words aloud, her voice trembling. That's her, she owns it. Victor Hale's jaw slackened. Impossible, he whispered. But too late, the recordings had already caught it. Naomi stepped forward, her white gown catching the cold shimmer of the chandeliers. I am Naomi Cole, CEO of Orion Global. 42 years in this world, 20 years building this empire. And tonight, you tried to erase me from my own stage. The red dress woman's smirk collapsed into silence. Her champagne flute slipped from her hand, crashing against marble. The arrogance drained from her face as recognition set in. Naomi didn't let the silence soften. She pressed. While you laughed, while you mocked, your billion-dollar deal sat waiting for my signature. The one signature you just lost. Phones shook as gasps rippled across the ballroom. The reporter whispered into his mic, his voice almost a cheer. She just named herself. She's the CEO. This is history unfolding. Victor Hale staggered back a step, the color draining from his face. He tried to recover, stammering. Miss Cole, there must be some misunderstanding. Naomi's eyes cut through him, unyielding. The only misunderstanding is yours. You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake. The line hit like a hammer. Guests erupted, some gasping, some clapping, many whispering furiously. In the corner, a donor in a navy suit muttered to his wife. She didn't even need to raise her voice. That's power. The red dress woman's companions fumbled with their cufflinks, their laughter dead in their throats. One finally muttered, desperate. We didn't mean. Naomi cut him off, calm but merciless. You meant every word, and now you'll live with them. The chandeliers seemed to gleam sharper, as if the entire ballroom itself bore witness. For the first time that night, Naomi Cole wasn't the quiet woman in the wrong gown. She was the center, the anchor, the force none of them could deny. And in that moment, power didn't need to shout. It simply revealed itself. The silence after Naomi's declaration didn't last. It cracked, fractured, and then spilled into chaos. Phones lifted higher, dozens of red lights glowing like embers under the chandeliers. Every angle, every whisper, every expression captured. The ballroom was no longer a stage. It was a witness stand. The red dress woman staggered back, her confidence gone. She clutched the edge of the table as if marble could hold her up. Her voice trembled, a far cry from the sneer she wielded minutes before. We didn't know. If we had realized... Naomi's gaze cut sharp. You knew enough. You chose arrogance over decency. Her companions shifted nervously, their tuxedo collars suddenly suffocating. One tried to laugh it off, voice brittle. It was just a joke. But the crowd wasn't laughing. A chorus of murmurs rose. That wasn't a joke. They humiliated her. Caught in 4 Kelvin. Victor Hale, the chairman, looked pale as parchment. His authority drained under the weight of Naomi's truth. He tugged at his cuff, searching for control, but found none. Miss Cole, surely we can discuss this privately. The request landed flat. Every guest knew privacy was gone. The court of public opinion was already in session. A donor near the back clapped once. Sharp, defiant. Others joined, hesitant at first, then stronger. Applause rippled across the hall, growing into a wave. Guests rose to their feet, not for the gala, not for the committee, but for Naomi Cole standing unshaken in white. The reporter whispered urgently into his phone, "Applause is breaking out." She turned the room in minutes. The footage is already viral. The guards who had been summoned to remove her now stepped back, their hands lowering. They avoided her eyes, ashamed, as though realizing they'd nearly dragged power itself out of its own house. The red dress woman pressed her palms together, pleading under her breath. "Please, Miss Cole, we didn't mean offense." Naomi didn't even look at her. The crowd did that work for her glares, whispers, condemnation. Every guest could feel the shift, the balance of power snapping into place. The laughter that once filled the air was gone, replaced by claps, by the buzz of live-stream comments pinging phones, by the sound of history rewriting itself in real time. For those who mocked, it was a collapse. For Naomi, it was simply gravity, the natural weight of truth pulling everything back into alignment. And in the glare of the chandeliers, they all saw it clearly. She was never the outsider. They were the intruders. The applause hadn't even settled when Naomi lifted her phone again. The ballroom hushed, every eye following her hand as if it held the verdict of the night. Her voice was calm, but the words landed like iron. "Lena, cancel the Hale contract. Effective immediately." Gasps ripped through the hall. Chairs scraped marble. The red dress woman's knees buckled, forcing her to grip the table for balance. Her companions leaned forward, their polished confidence dissolving into panic. On the phone, Lena's reply was crisp, merciless. Confirmed. $1 billion deal terminated. Access revoked. Notification sent to legal. The chandeliers seemed to burn brighter at the words. The crowd erupted, some gasped in disbelief, others clapped, some cheered outright. Phones shook as guests scrambled to capture the moment. Victor Hale's voice cracked, stripped of command. "Wait, you can't just..." Naomi cut across him, unwavering. "I can. I just did." The room roared. Applause surged again, this time thunderous. The red dress woman whispered, almost to herself, "$1 billion gone?" Her face crumbled, the weight of loss written in every line. Naomi's gaze swept the hall. Her tone remained steady, not triumphant. Not vengeful, simply absolute. Orion Global does not partner with arrogance. We don't sign with those who mistake dignity for weakness. And we don't build with families who believe wealth excuses cruelty. Every phone caught it. Every guest felt it. The guards stepped fully aside now, shoulders slumping. They knew they had almost crossed a line that could have ended their careers. Victor tried one last gasp of authority. "This was a misunderstanding. Surely we can review." Naomi's eyes pinned him where he stood. "No misunderstanding, only exposure. Your name was on the contract this morning. It isn't tonight." The words hung in the air like a gavel striking wood. Final, irreversible. Guests cheered again, some even standing on chairs to clap louder. The reporter whispered into his recording, breathless, "This is history. A black CEO just erased $1 billion deal in front of the very people who mocked her." The Hale family looked hollow, their empire's arrogance bleeding out under the glow of chandeliers, and Naomi Cole silent, still, unshaken, stood at the center of it all. A woman who didn't need to shout to end an empire's illusion. Her verdict had been spoken, and the ballroom would never forget it. The ballroom stood frozen, marble floors holding the weight of silence heavier than any music ever played here. Naomi lowered her phone, her hands steady, her gaze unyielding. The billion-dollar erasure had already rippled through the room, contracts void, reputations undone, but she wasn't finished. She stepped forward, the white of her gown cutting through the sea of sequins and tuxedos like a blade of clarity. Her voice carried not raised, not rushed, but deliberate, each syllable chosen like a verdict. You wanted me gone because I didn't look the part, because power, to you, is stitched into gowns, poured into glasses, written on last names. But hear me now, power isn't image, it's integrity. Respect isn't borrowed, it's commanded. And tonight, you learn the difference. The chandeliers seemed to dim for her words, as if the room itself bowed to their weight. She let the silence breathe, every guest hanging on the pause. Then she finished, her tone sharpened into finality. I don't need your applause. I don't need your recognition. I am not the footage you captured, I am the result of it. Remember this, dignity doesn't ask permission. It writes history. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one breathed. The words settled like thunder rolling across marble, pressing into every chest, every phone, every conscience. Then applause erupted, fierce, uncontainable. Chairs scraped as people rose to their feet. The wave rolled from one end of the ballroom to the other, claps, cheers, even shouts of affirmation. The young reporter's voice cracked as he narrated into his phone. She turned humiliation into history. Naomi Cole just changed the story of this gala forever. The red dress woman hid her face in her hands. Victor Hale stood hollow, his authority crumbled into dust. Guests who once smirked now clapped harder than anyone, desperate to align themselves with the truth revealed. And Naomi, calm, unmoved, simply turned. She didn't bow, didn't wave, didn't acknowledge the roar around her. She had no need. The room's reaction was irrelevant. Her message had already been written into the night. As she walked away, the applause only grew louder, echoing against marble columns, rattling crystal, shaking the very air. Because everyone in that ballroom knew. They hadn't just witnessed a confrontation, they had witnessed a correction. And Naomi Cole had delivered it not with shouting, not with spectacle, but with the one thing arrogance never anticipates: truth.